I still remember the day I found out I had inherited Grandma's condo. It wasn't just a building to me. It was a piece of her. A tangible memory of Sunday dinners, secret recipes, and the way she would hum softly while rearranging the flowers in the living room. I never expected it to become the center of the storm that would tear my family apart. When the lawyer called, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, trying to figure out why the rent seemed higher this month. "Ms. Ahmed," he said, his voice formal but polite, "I'm calling regarding the estate of your late grandmother. You are the sole inheritor of her condominium at Maplewood Towers." I froze. "Wait, what?" He repeated it, calmly, carefully, as though speaking slowly would help the news sink in. I hung up and stared at the wall, my mind buzzing. My grandmother had always hinted she wanted me to have something of hers, but a condo. That was beyond anything I expected. I immediately called my brother, Rafiq. I wanted to share the news, partly because I was excited, and partly because I didn't want him to feel left out. But the moment he picked up, I realized something was off. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the excitement in my voice. "You won't believe what just happened. I inherited Grandma's condo." There was silence on the other end. Then he laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh of shared excitement. It was the kind of laugh that hides something. "Wow, congratulations," he said, a little too slowly. "That's great," I frowned. "You sound weird. Are you okay?" "Oh yeah, just surprised, I guess," he mumbled. And that was the end of the conversation. I brushed it off. Rafiq had always been a little competitive, especially with anything that came from Grandma. But I never imagined he would go as far as crossing boundaries. The next week, I visited the condo to see it for myself. Walking through the hallway, I felt Grandma's presence everywhere. The smell of her old perfume lingering faintly. The soft carpet she insisted we always keep spotless. I ran my fingers along the kitchen countertop she had picked out herself and sat in the living room, imagining her voice telling me stories I had long forgotten. Everything seemed perfect, until I noticed the first small irregularity. There was a notice taped to the inside of the elevator. Something about a change in ownership. My stomach dropped, but I pushed it aside. Maybe it was routine maintenance, I told myself. That evening, I called my friend and confidant, Layla. She was always good at grounding me when my imagination ran wild. "Layla," I said, pacing in my apartment, "I'm just nervous. What if someone tries to claim it? What if Rafiq—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "He wouldn't, right? Grandma left it to you, legally. He can't just take it." Her voice calmed me, but it didn't erase the pit in my stomach. Something about Rafiq's reaction when I first told him gnawed at me. Something was brewing beneath that fake smile. The first family dinner after Grandma's passing was tense. Rafiq arrived late, as usual, wearing that smug expression he perfected over the years. He greeted everyone, but I noticed the way he kept glancing at me, not with warmth, but calculation. My parents tried to diffuse it with light conversation about the weather and work, but I felt it. The subtle undercurrent, the silent battle lines forming across the dining table. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on sharing memories of Grandma. I told the story about how she had once hidden chocolate coins in the living room during Ramadan, and everyone laughed. Rafiq's laugh, though, was different, forced, measured. Later that night, alone in my room, I sat with the condo papers spread across my bed. I traced my finger along the dotted lines of my name, the address, the legal disclaimers. It was all mine, or so I thought. Little did I know, that was only the beginning. A few days later, I received a text from the condo management office. It wasn't unusual, just routine information about upcoming maintenance. But then, I noticed something strange. The message included references to a new owner. And suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. My heart pounded. Could it be? No, it must be a mistake. I called the office immediately. I inherited this condo, I explained. It's under my name. Who is this new owner? The receptionist hesitated. According to our records, Mr. Rafiq Ahmed recently finalized a sale on this unit. I dropped the phone. My mind refused to process it. Sold it, I whispered. He sold it. How? For the next hour, I retraced every conversation I had with Rafiq. Every glance, every little comment that had seemed off. Suddenly, the pieces started to fit together like a puzzle I didn't want to see. His weird laugh, his measured responses, the way he had looked at me at the family dinner. It wasn't just envy. It was greed. Pure selfish greed. I couldn't believe it. My brother, my family, had betrayed me in the most shocking way imaginable. But even as anger flared, a small cold realization settled in my chest. He had made a mistake. He had underestimated me, underestimated my resolve, underestimated the fact that I wouldn't let this go, and that mistake would be his undoing. After I hung up the phone with the condo office, I couldn't breathe. My hands were trembling, and my vision blurred with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Rafiq, my own brother, had sold my inheritance behind my back. The condo that Grandma had left me, the place that held a lifetime of memories, gone. And he hadn't even bothered to tell me. I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling. How could he? I replayed every interaction I'd had with him over the past few weeks. That smug smile at the dinner table, that laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Every subtle comment suddenly felt like a warning I had missed. But the more I thought about it, the more something didn't sit right. How had he managed this sale so quickly? Grandma's condo wasn't cheap, and legal processes aren't usually that simple. My instincts screamed at me. He had to have cut corners somewhere. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I wanted to know who had bought it, when, and under what conditions. The condo records were public, but it took hours of scrolling, searching, and clicking through documents. And then I found it, the sale record. The buyer's name made my heart skip a beat. A local investor, someone with a reputation for flipping properties. Nothing illegal there, but what caught my eye was the date of sale. It was finalized just 3 days after Grandma's will had been filed. And here's the crucial part. The documents had one glaring error. My signature had been forged. I froze. My signature. On papers I had never seen, never signed. My brother had committed forgery. I reread the documents again, just to be sure. The lawyer in me, yes, I admit, I often imagine myself as some kind of investigator in moments like this. Noticed something else. There were discrepancies in the notarization, a missing stamp, a procedural error that would make this entire sale contestable in court. A cold fury settled over me. He had thought I would never find out. He had thought he could get away with it. But Rafiq had made a huge mistake, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The next day, I confronted him. I didn't want to do it over the phone. I wanted him to see me, see the fire in my eyes. I drove over to his apartment, my heart pounding so hard. I thought he could hear it from the other side of the door. When he opened it, he greeted me with that same confident smirk. "Hey sis, what brings you here?" "Cut the act, Rafiq," I said, stepping inside. "We need to talk." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, about what?" I pulled out the printed documents and placed them on the kitchen table. "About this, about the condo, about the fact that you sold it behind my back and forged my signature in the process." For a moment, he didn't speak. I watched as his confident facade faltered ever so slightly. But then, almost arrogantly, he laughed. "Oh, come on. It's not a big deal. I did you a favor. You wouldn't have known what to do with it anyway." I felt my blood boil. A favor. You call stealing my inheritance a favor?" He shrugged, leaning back against the counter. Honestly, you always were too soft. I'm just helping you manage things. My hands clenched into fists. The anger, the betrayal, the disbelief, all of it crashed over me. But beneath it, something else was rising. Determination. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just some naive little sister who would cry and then quietly disappear. You know, I said slowly, savoring the words. You made a mistake, a huge one, and mistakes like this have consequences. His smirk faltered. Oh really? And what are you going to do about it? I leaned forward, my eyes locked onto his. I'm going to make sure you regret this. And trust me, it's not just about getting the condo back. It's about making sure everyone knows who you really are. Rafik laughed nervously, clearly unsure now, but trying to hide it. You're bluffing, I smiled, cold and sharp. Am I? That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing through every detail of the sale, every potential legal loophole, every tiny mistake he had made. The more I thought about it, the more I realized he hadn't been careful at all. He had assumed I would never notice, that I would never fight back, and he was wrong. I spent the next several days gathering evidence. Emails between him and the buyer, notarization errors, procedural mistakes, even messages he had accidentally left on his phone about the sale. Each discovery made my resolve stronger. Each proof of his carelessness brought a sense of satisfaction, the faintest glimmer of victory, before the real battle had even begun. By the end of the week, I had a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. And I had allies ready, whether he knew it or not, because he had made a crucial mistake. He had underestimated me, and that was something he would pay for. The next time I saw Rafik, it wasn't by accident. I had called him to catch up, and he had agreed, oblivious to the storm he was walking into. He thought he could charm his way through it. He thought his smug smile and casual tone would be enough to disarm me. How wrong he was. We met at a small cafe near the city center. People around us chatted and sipped their coffee, completely unaware that a family war was about to unfold at one of their tables. Rafik arrived 15 minutes late, as usual, wearing that same tailored jacket and that irritatingly confident expression. Hey, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was… Cut it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, though I didn't apologize for it. We're not here to talk about traffic, he blinked, taken aback by my tone. That was the first crack in his facade. I leaned forward and placed the evidence I had collected on the table. Emails, notarization mistakes, even photos of documents he had carelessly left around. Rafik, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Do you know what this is? He glanced down, feigning ignorance. Documents. I sighed, a mix of frustration and disbelief coursing through me. These documents prove you forged my signature and sold my condo behind my back. You thought you could pull this off without me noticing, but you made mistakes, big ones. Rafik leaned back, trying to regain control. Mistakes? Come on, you're overreacting. I didn't… Overreacting? I cut him off. You stole from me, Rafik. You took something that wasn't yours, and you did it thinking I'd never find out. Do you understand what that makes you? His jaw tightened. I thought you didn't want the condo. I was helping, like I said before. I laughed, bitter and incredulous. Helping? By selling it for your profit. By forging my signature. That's not help. That's theft. Plain and simple. People at nearby tables were glancing at us now, sensing the tension. Rafik tried to calm himself, rubbing his hands nervously. I could see him calculating, thinking of some excuse, some way to manipulate me. But the more he tried, the clearer it became to me that he hadn't thought this through. You've underestimated me, I said quietly, leaning in. You assumed I would just cry, or shout, or disappear. But I'm not that sister anymore. I'm not the one who lets you get away with everything. I see you now, Rafiq. I see exactly who you are. His eyes flicked nervously to the edge of the table, avoiding mine. Look, I can fix this. Maybe we can— No, I interrupted firmly. You can't fix this. What's done is done. And the consequences. They're coming. You've left a trail, Rafiq. A trail you think no one would follow. But I have. And I'm not stopping until everyone knows the truth. He swallowed hard, the confidence in his posture faltering. The smirk that had always made me sick to my stomach was gone. For the first time, I saw fear, just a flicker, but enough to know that he realized he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. I didn't think— he started, voice shaky. You didn't think I would fight back, I said, my voice softer now, almost calm, but deadly in its clarity. You didn't think I would gather evidence, track every detail, and expose your lies. But I have. And that's the difference between you and me, Rafiq. I fight. You cheat. He looked down at the table, mumbling under his breath. I didn't care. The damage was already done. I had seen the cracks in his armor, and I knew I had the upper hand now. Not legally yet, but psychologically. After a long, tense silence, I stood up. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move, because whatever you do, I'm ready, and I won't back down. Rafiq didn't respond. He just watched me leave, a mixture of fear and anger etched into his features. I knew he thought this confrontation would intimidate me, that it would silence me. But instead, it had ignited a fire that couldn't be extinguished. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. Exhaustion from facing the betrayal, from the anger and heartbreak, from the realization that someone so close could betray me so completely. But exhilaration too, because now the path was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do, and I knew he had no idea what was coming. That night, I sat at my desk, reviewing every document, every email, every photo I had collected. I needed to make sure I had everything, because mistakes would be fatal in the battle I was about to wage. Rafiq had underestimated me, and I would make him pay, not just for the condo, but for the audacity of thinking he could cross me and walk away unscathed. By the time the city outside my window had gone quiet, I had a plan forming. It was delicate, precise, and carefully calculated. And I knew one thing for certain. When it unfolded, there would be no turning back. After that confrontation at the cafe, I realized something important. Anger alone wouldn't win this battle. I needed proof, concrete, undeniable evidence that could expose Rafiq for what he really was. Emotional arguments weren't enough. He was clever, manipulative, and he thrived on doubt. If I wanted justice, I needed documents, timelines, and witnesses. I started by reviewing every piece of paperwork I could get my hands on. The condo sale contract was my first target. I pored over it line by line, every clause, every signature. That's when I noticed it, something subtle but critical. The notary's stamp was partially faded, smudged in a way that suggested it might not have been properly authorized. The dates didn't align exactly with the standard legal processing time. I cross-referenced everything with the city property records and noticed another discrepancy. The sale had been expedited unusually quickly. Rafiq had skipped several standard procedures, probably thinking I wouldn't notice. But that speed, that eagerness to bypass the rules, became his Achilles heel. Next, I dug into emails between Rafiq and the buyer. He had been sloppy, leaving traces, sending messages from personal accounts rather than secure ones, boasting casually about getting the sister out of the way. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read his arrogance laid bare in black and white. He hadn't thought I'd find these emails, but he had underestimated my determination. I didn't stop there. I reached out to the buyer, pretending to be someone interested in a new property he had listed. I asked casual questions about the condo and subtly steered the conversation toward the sale. To my surprise, the buyer revealed information that made my stomach drop, but also made my heart race with the thrill of leverage. Apparently, Rafik had falsified some documents to speed up the sale, and the buyer had noticed. But instead of backing out, the buyer went along with it, thinking Rafik's position was solid. That, right there, was the crucial mistake. He had involved a third party in his deception, without ensuring total security. I spent the next 2 days cross-checking everything with my lawyer friend, Layla. We mapped out every potential flaw in the sale: forgery, notary errors, procedural shortcuts, and the buyer's willingness to cooperate if approached correctly. Layla's eyes widened as I laid everything out. "This is actually pretty serious," she said, her voice tight with concern. "If you act on this carefully, you can not only contest the sale, but expose Rafik for fraud. He didn't cover his tracks properly." I felt a surge of vindication. My anger and heartbreak were still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now they were accompanied by a cold clarity. I wasn't just hurt, I was in control, and I intended to stay that way. Over the next week, I documented everything meticulously: screenshots, copies of emails, photos of the notarized documents, and timelines. I even recorded phone calls with the buyer under careful legal advisement. Each piece of evidence added weight to my case, and each discovery deepened my sense of betrayal, but also my resolve. Every time I thought about Rafik, I imagined that smug face, the arrogance in his eyes, and I smiled. He had underestimated me. He had assumed I would cry, beg, or back down. But here I was, building a fortress of evidence, preparing for the moment when the truth would hit him like a thunderclap. By the end of the week, the evidence stack on my desk was impressive. I could see the path forward clearly: confront the buyer officially, prepare legal notices, and plan my next move against Rafik. The battle wasn't over, but the scales were beginning to tip in my favor. I couldn't help but think about Grandma. She had always believed in fairness, honesty, and standing up for what was right. I felt her presence with me, whispering strength into my resolve. Rafik had betrayed family trust, but he had made a crucial error, and now the game was mine to play. By the time I finished gathering all the evidence, I realized one thing: anger alone wouldn't be enough. Rafik wasn't the kind of person who could be confronted with words and left speechless. He was clever, manipulative, and dangerously arrogant. If I wanted justice, I needed a plan, something precise, calculated, and impossible for him to ignore. I started by mapping out every step he had taken to sell the condo, from forged signatures to skipped notary protocols to the emails he had sent without securing them properly. The list was extensive, and at the center of it all was his arrogance, the one thing that could be turned against him. I called Layla, my lawyer friend, to discuss the strategy. She was cautious, but supportive, helping me understand the legal angles and risks. First, she said firmly, "We need to make sure the buyer is on your side. If he cooperates, we can challenge the sale, claim fraud, and even recover damages." I nodded. "I've been in contact. He's hesitant, but he's already aware of Rafik's shortcuts. If I approach him properly, I think he'll see the benefit in cooperating with me rather than staying silent." "Good." "Next," she continued, "we need to prepare a psychological approach. Rafik thinks he's untouchable. That ego is his weakness. If you play this right, you don't just fight him legally, you make him panic." I smiled, feeling the first thrill of real power. This was no longer about anger. It was about control. Over the next few days, I structured my plan in 3 phases. Phase 1, establish the evidence trail. Every document, email, and notarization error was organized and ready. I made sure nothing could be challenged. I even kept a digital backup in case he tried to destroy or alter anything. Phase 2. Engage the buyer. I planned a subtle, careful approach to the buyer. Nothing aggressive, just enough to make him aware of the legal implications of the forged documents and procedural shortcuts. If he agreed to cooperate, it would add an undeniable layer to my case. Phase 3. Psychological pressure. This was the fun part. Rafik needed to feel the shift in power. Every casual interaction, every subtle hint that I knew more than I should, would be carefully calculated. He needed to understand that I wasn't just angry, I was prepared, strategic, and unstoppable. I started writing a playbook for myself, a detailed timeline of actions, reactions, and contingencies. I imagined Rafik reading it one day, realizing just how meticulously I had orchestrated every step. The thought sent a thrill down my spine. At the same time, I had to be careful. Overconfidence could be dangerous. I rehearsed every conversation in my head, anticipating his excuses, his gaslighting attempts, even his lies. I reminded myself that this was a family matter. Emotional stakes were high, but that didn't mean I couldn't approach it with precision. By the end of the week, my plan was solid. I even practiced a calm, collected demeanor for when I confronted him next. I would never let him see the full extent of my fury. Instead, I would use calm authority to unnerve him. Late that night, I sat alone in my apartment, looking at the city lights through my window. I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, anticipation, and a cold determination I hadn't felt before. Rafik had thought he could outsmart me. He had thought he could steal my inheritance and walk away with it. But he had made a fatal mistake. He underestimated me. And now, with my plan in place, he had no idea what was coming. The pieces were all set. The board was ready, and I was ready to strike. I called this stage the setup, because that's exactly what it felt like. Arranging the pieces just so, then stepping back and watching the trap close. After days of paperwork, timelines, and whispered conversations with Layla and the buyer, I knew the next moves had to be subtle. Loud accusations would only make Rafik retreat into denial. Hire a slick lawyer and try to smear me. Slow pressure, on the other hand, would make him flinch, then panic, then make the mistakes that would finish him. The first thing I did was create illusions of ignorance. If he suspected I knew everything, he would go cold and become careful. So I called him, casually, and we met at our parents' house, under the pretense of family time. He came in with that same rehearsed smile, the one he used whenever he wanted people to forget the cuts under the surface. I sat beside him on the sofa and acted like I had no idea what was coming. "You okay?" he asked, trying to sound relaxed. "You've been distant." I smiled in a small, unthreatening way. "Just tired from work. You know how it is." I kept the conversation light. Asked about his job, his friends, even his latest hobby. While we talked, I let slip small, harmless things. A mention of the buyer, like it was a non-event. A casual reference to notarization quirks, as if it were dry bureaucracy. The goal was to make him comfortable. People who feel safe reveal more than they think. Later that evening, I texted him a seemingly innocuous message. "Grandma would be mad at the paperwork mess, huh? 2 dots. Done." He responded with a thumbs up emoji and a quick joke. He wasn't suspicious. He assumed I was being sentimental. He was wrong. Parallel to these performances, I engaged the buyer more directly. His name was Imran, mid-30s, ambitious, and not as ruthless as his business reputation suggested. He was nervous about the forged documents, not because he was a saint, but because a legal fight could ruin one of his bigger deals. I treated him with a mix of firmness and charm, showing him the practical upside of cooperating. A clean title later, shared responsibility for damages he might otherwise face alone, and a chance to distance himself from fraud before it consumed his portfolio. On a rainy Thursday, Imran met me at a neutral cafe. He slid a thin envelope across the table. A copy of correspondence he'd had with Rafiq, a record of the deposit, and a note about the notary's strange behavior. He didn't sign anything then. Too risky. But his hand shook when he pushed the envelope. That was my opening. With Imran's tacit cooperation, I also began nudging at the social supports around Rafiq. I called my parents more often, dropping quiet hints about how stressed both their children were. I arranged coincidental run-ins with cousins and friends who mentioned property prices or legal protections in the most casual of tones. Social pressure, even quiet and polite, works in strange ways. People start to talk, opinions form, and an arrogant man begins to hear whispers where there were none before. Meanwhile, I prepared legal letters, not the loud, courtroom-ready filings, but carefully worded notices drafted by Layla that suggested escalation without openly declaring it. Enough ambiguity to unsettle him. The first notice went to the buyer, politely stating that the sale's validity was under question, pending confirmation of signatures and notary authorization. That alone made Imran pause, and I watched as he sprinted into stress, which trickled back to Rafiq in the form of terse messages and late-night calls. Rafiq began to change. The calls to his broker increased, his tone sharpened in family conversations, and the smugness that had shielded him for so long thinned to a brittle veneer. He made small mistakes. A hurried phone call where he mentioned a name he shouldn't have, a document he left open on his laptop, in a cafe where a nosy patron caught a glimpse. Those were the mini victories, subtle, almost laughable, but they built a case that would stand up in court and shatter his carefully constructed lie. Then came the sweetest part of the setup, the controlled leak. I didn't want to blow everything at once. I wanted pressure intensifying like simmering steam. So I arranged for a close family friend, someone who still had influence with our parents, to mention some very troubling legal irregularities in passing conversation during Sunday tea. The friend didn't know specifics, and I didn't give them any. Just the hint. That was all it took for our parents to grow worried, and worry filters down like water through cracks. Rafiq's panic didn't look dramatic. It was a series of small, reckless acts. He texted our mother asking for calm. He called our father at odd hours, insisting he needed help with a financial hiccup. He started to distance himself from family gatherings, arriving late, leaving early, dodging eyes. He didn't realize that every swerve made him look guiltier to people seeing the pattern, not knowing the why. Most importantly, I remained composed. That was the point. When he came at me, furious once, shaking with adrenaline, I gave him a cool, measured face and a soft smile. "Why are you so tense?" I asked. "You did the right thing, didn't you? Sold a property and handled it." He raged and sputtered. I hummed and kept my hands on my coffee cup. Calm is a kind of weapon. It disarms people who expect drama. He expected me to break. He expected me to beg. He expected, in short, to control the narrative. He couldn't. On a grey morning 3 weeks into the setup, the trap truly began to click into place. Imran agreed to meet with Layla and me. Not to sign anything, but to discuss what would happen if he cooperated. We kept the conversation strictly professional, laying out possible outcomes and the legal timeline. Imran listened, then asked a question that made my pulse quicken. "If I help you, will you go after the buyer's initial deposit? There's a chance I could be held liable if this goes sideways." He was thinking sensibly about exposure and risk. That was the final calculation I wanted him to make. After the meeting, we walked out into the drizzle, and I watched Imran's face as realization dawned. He could walk away clean by cooperating. He could transfer his risk onto the real culprit, the brother who had orchestrated the deceit. The consequence was inevitable. If he cooperated, the evidence would point directly back to Rafiq. That night, I lay awake replaying every move, savoring the way pressure had become panic in invisible, precise ripples. Rafiq's shoulders seemed smaller now, his voice thinner when he spoke. He had been pushed into error after error, and I had not once raised my voice. I didn't need to. The setup had done the work. He had started to crumble. The final act of the setup would be public exposure. But not yet. Not until the buyer signed on. Not until Layla confirmed the legal foothold. And not until I was absolutely certain that every thread led back to him. For now, I would sit quietly and watch. A patient predator, a sister who had been wronged and had decided to become the architect of retribution. Because he had made a crucial mistake. And mistakes, like rot in a foundation, get worse the longer you ignore them. I thought I had the upper hand. Every document, every email, every slip-up from Rafiq felt like a step toward inevitable victory. But nothing had prepared me for the twist that changed everything. It came in the form of an unexpected text from Imran, the buyer. "Can we meet? I have new info." My heart skipped a beat. New information could mean anything. Was it good? Bad? Dangerous? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever it was, I had to act fast. We met in a small, quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. Imran arrived, looking anxious, fidgeting with the corner of his jacket. He slid a manila folder across the table. "I didn't want to say anything over the phone," he said. "But your brother didn't just forge signatures. He forged someone else's approval too." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Imran took a deep breath. The property was co-owned on paper by a shell company Grandma had set up years ago. Legally, Rafiq didn't have the authority to sell it without clearance from the company board. He didn't bother checking. I didn't realize it at first, but now, this could blow everything open. My mind raced. A shell company, co-owners. This wasn't just forgery anymore. This was a huge legal disaster waiting to happen for him. He had assumed the condo sale was a simple transaction between him and me, but he had skipped the most crucial layer. And there's more. Imran continued, lowering his voice. "I did some digging, just to be safe. One of the board members is willing to cooperate, but only if the whole thing is exposed correctly. They want it done legally, cleanly, so they aren't implicated." I felt a thrill of vindication, so intense it made my hands tremble. Not only had Rafiq betrayed me, but he had also left a fatal legal loophole that I could exploit. The arrogance, the rush, the assumption that I wouldn't notice. It was the very thing that would destroy him. I leaned back in my chair, trying to contain my excitement. "So, he's done everything wrong?" I asked. Imran nodded. "Everything. If you move carefully, this could be over in your favor completely." I took a deep breath, allowing myself a moment to savor the twist. Up until now, I had been gathering evidence, pressuring him subtly, and preparing my legal moves. But now I had a secret weapon. A legal angle so devastating that Rafiq wouldn't see it coming. That night, I went home and laid out every piece of information, cross-referencing with my original evidence. Every email he sent, every forged signature, every misstep now formed a clear, undeniable path. The twist wasn't just that he made a mistake. It was that his mistake was catastrophic. I smiled quietly to myself. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Rafiq's overconfidence, his arrogance, his smug certainty. It had blinded him to the very thing that would undo him. The next morning, I prepared a subtle, calculated move. I sent a casual message to Rafiq, almost innocent in tone. Hey, just checking in. Have you reviewed all the condo documents recently? Some things seem a little off. He responded almost instantly. What things? Everything is fine. I did everything by the book. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The seed had been planted. The doubt was in his mind. And in his panic, he would start making more mistakes, revealing even more evidence against himself. The twist had shifted the game entirely. What had started as a personal betrayal was now a legal and strategic battlefield. And I had the decisive advantage. I finally understood one truth. Rafiq's arrogance wasn't just his flaw. It was his undoing. And with careful moves, the victory wouldn't just be mine. It would be inevitable. I leaned back in my chair, letting the gravity of the twist sink in. The pieces were falling into place. He had made a crucial mistake. And this time, there was no coming back. The morning of the exposure felt electric. I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since discovering the sale. Every step I had taken, the evidence, the buyer's cooperation, the shell company oversight, was about to converge. This wasn't just about getting the condo back anymore. This was about revealing the truth and making Rafiq face the consequences of his arrogance. Layla and I met early at her office to review the final strategy. Remember, she said firmly, calm, composed, controlled. Let him panic. Don't give him a reason to think you're acting out of rage. You're playing chess, not checkers. I nodded, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. Everything was ready. The notarization errors, the forged signatures, the emails, and now the confirmation from Imran and the cooperating board member. Even minor slips that Rafiq had made during our cafe interactions were documented. There was no way he could wiggle out of this. I arranged a family gathering, inviting both parents and Rafiq. I called it a Sunday brunch. Casual, calm, nothing that would raise suspicion. But in my mind, this brunch was the stage for the exposure. Rafiq arrived late, of course, and immediately tried his usual smirk. Hey everyone, brunch looks great. His voice carried that same overconfident tone I had grown to hate. I smiled at him, quietly, innocently. Thanks for coming, I said. Then I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. I thought it would be nice to go over some paperwork from the condo. His eyes flicked to the folder. I could see a flicker of unease, almost imperceptible, but there. He wasn't expecting this. I opened the folder and began methodically laying out the evidence. Rafiq, I said, voice calm. You forged my signature. You skipped legal procedures. And most importantly, you sold a property that wasn't fully yours to sell. I placed the notarized documents, the emails, and Imran's correspondence neatly on the table. And here, I continued, is confirmation from the shell company board member who confirms that you didn't have the authority to finalize this sale. Every shortcut you took, every mistake is documented. Rafiq's jaw tightened. You can't prove anything, he said, voice trembling just slightly. I leaned back, keeping my tone soft, almost conversational. I can, and I have, and the buyer, Imran, has confirmed the discrepancies. Every step you took has been recorded and can be presented in court. The evidence doesn't lie, Rafiq. You do. The room fell silent. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Rafiq's face went pale. He opened his mouth to argue, to deny, to gaslight, but no words came out. The weight of the exposure, the inevitability of consequences, had left him paralyzed. I pressed on. Do you remember that cafe meeting, Rafiq? The one where you thought I didn't notice your slips? I did. Every casual comment, every misstep, every lie, they're all part of the case against you. And now, everyone here can see exactly what you've done. He shook his head, frantic. This isn't true. I didn't. You forged my signature, I said evenly, sold my inheritance, and assumed I would never find out. You gambled with family trust, and you lost. Imran arrived shortly after, carefully coordinated. He confirmed everything, his presence undeniable proof. He didn't need to speak loudly. Just sitting at the table, holding his folder, was enough to crush any remaining denials. Finally, I placed the last document on the table, a notarized declaration from the shell company. This, I said, looking directly at Rafiq, is your undoing. Every corner you cut, every lie you told, is now public and documented. There is no escape. The finality of it hit him. His shoulders slumped, the arrogant facade shattered completely. My parents were silent, their eyes a mix of shock, sadness, and relief. The truth was out. The betrayal had been revealed. And now, Rafiq would face the consequences he had tried to avoid. I sat back, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about justice, about standing up when someone thought they could betray you and walk away. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a calm sense of victory. Not only had I exposed him, but I had done so with precision, without losing myself to rage. Rafiq didn't say another word. The room was silent, but the message was clear. He had lost. The days following the exposure were surreal. Rafiq, once so confident and untouchable, became almost unrecognizable. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a constant tension that radiated from him in every interaction. The weight of exposure isn't just legal, it's psychological, emotional, and social. He had betrayed his sister, and now everyone knew it. My parents struggled to process everything. I could see the mix of shock, disappointment, and guilt in their eyes. They had always loved Rafiq, tried to shield him, and now they were forced to reconcile with the reality that he had committed fraud against family. It wasn't easy for any of us. Rafiq avoided eye contact, spoke less, and left family gatherings early. Friends and extended relatives who learned of the scandal treated him differently, carefully polite but distant. Word travels fast in a small social circle, and the story of his betrayal spread. The psychological pressure that had started with subtle hints at the cafe and brunch had now escalated naturally. Public exposure magnified the consequences. Meanwhile, I took careful steps to recover what was rightfully mine. Imran, now fully cooperating, facilitated the reversal of the sale. The condo was returned legally under my name, and every document verified and corrected. The sense of relief when I finally stepped back into the condo, untouched and fully mine again, was immense. Walking through the rooms, I felt Grandma's presence stronger than ever. Her memory, her trust in me, finally honored. But the fallout wasn't just about property or legality. It was emotional. I noticed small shifts in myself. The anger and betrayal that had fueled my plan gradually transformed into a calm confidence. I realized something profound. I had been underestimated my entire life by those closest to me, but standing up, gathering evidence, planning meticulously, and finally confronting the betrayal had changed me. I felt stronger, wiser, and more self-assured than ever before. Rafiq, however, faced consequences that extended beyond family disappointment. Legal advisors were involved, and he had to answer for the forgery and procedural shortcuts. The stress and humiliation he experienced were nothing compared to what he had tried to inflict on me. But they were significant. His reputation, always carefully maintained, now bore visible cracks. He had underestimated, not just me, but the consequences of arrogance and deceit. As for our parents, it took time for them to rebuild their trust in the family dynamic. They apologized for not noticing earlier, for assuming Rafiq's confidence was harmless, and I accepted their apologies with grace, not bitterness. but a measured understanding that family is complex, messy, and sometimes painful. Most importantly, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't just reclaiming the condo or exposing my brother, it was reclaiming my own power. The betrayal could have destroyed me, could have left me bitter and fearful, but instead it became a turning point. I discovered resilience, resourcefulness, and the courage to face what others feared to confront. By the end of the fallout, life started to feel balanced again. I visited the condo, sitting in Grandma's favorite chair, looking out at the city skyline, and allowed myself a deep breath of contentment. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through calculated action, patience, and truth. And as I looked around the condo that now fully belonged to me, I understood one final truth. Betrayal can hurt, but it can also teach you the depth of your own strength. I had been wronged, yes, but I had turned that wrong into power, justice, and clarity. Rafik had made a crucial mistake by underestimating me, and I had made sure that mistake would define him for the rest of his life. The condo was quiet that evening. Bathed in the golden glow of the sunset, I stood by the window, looking out at the skyline, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few months. Betrayal, anger, planning, exposure, and finally justice. It had been a whirlwind, but I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. Rafik was no longer the invincible figure I once feared. He had learned too late that arrogance and deception carry consequences. The legal system had corrected the errors he had created, and the social repercussions had made the betrayal impossible to ignore. Watching him grapple with the aftermath was not about satisfaction or revenge. It was about justice being served, naturally and inevitably. I walked through the condo, touching the familiar walls, remembering Grandma's laughter, the warmth of family gatherings, and the lessons she had taught me. This condo wasn't just property, it was history, memories, and a reminder of the values that Rafik had tried to trample. Now it belonged to me, legally and emotionally. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into a new rhythm. I focused on restoring the condo, making it a home once more, and reconnecting with friends and family who had supported me quietly throughout the ordeal. Every conversation reminded me how important it was to trust my instincts and act decisively when wronged. Rafik remained distant, quiet, and visibly humbled. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone. While I did not harbor malice, I also knew that forgiveness would come on my terms, not his. He had made a choice, and the consequences had followed. The lesson was clear. Betrayal cannot stand against truth, preparation, and courage. One afternoon, I sat in Grandma's favorite chair, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on the journey. I realized that this experience had changed me. I had discovered patience, strategy, and strength I didn't know I possessed. The betrayal could have broken me, but instead, it had empowered me. I had turned pain into purpose, anger into action, and deception into justice. I smiled, thinking of Grandma, and the way she always believed in standing up for what was right. I whispered softly, almost to myself, "We did it. Justice has been served." The condo was no longer just a space. It was a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of refusing to be underestimated. And as I looked out at the city, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Betrayal can wound, but it can also teach you the depth of your strength. And that strength is unstoppable when you claim it. Rafik had made a crucial mistake, and because of that mistake, I had discovered a power I never knew I had. The story had come full circle, from betrayal to justice, from anger to empowerment, and in that quiet moment, I knew I had truly won, not just the condo, but myself. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? What do you want to hear from us in next video? If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story.